Yo, what's up, guys? So I got the request to do phones that are actually under $200. So I went and found phones that are under $200. I'll show you guys these screenshots as well. These are some of my favorite older flagship phones to recommend to people that are on a very tight budget. So this is like as good as you can get for price to performance ratio. And we're going to kick it off with the Samsung Galaxy S10e. Amazon has this phone for right now $144. And remember, these are USA prices. If you're in another country, the prices will differ. But the Galaxy S10e is one of my favorite devices pretty much of all time. It's a compact older flagship phone and it's still awesome. Check out my videos that I've done on it. I've done a lot of videos on this phone. Aluminum frame, glass back, very compact design, very easy to one hand. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It has a very nice display at 5.8 inches. It's a dynamic AMOLED HDR10 Plus. 1080p 438 for the PPI. Just a beautiful display, very high quality, punch hole on the right hand side, and just absolutely awesome. So this phone did receive its last major OS update, Android 12, One UI 4.1. It will get roughly around 2, hopefully 3 years of security patches. So that's really good. It also has a very strong chipset still. The Snapdragon 855 on here. Check out my full gaming test I did on this video. It flies through any game I threw at it. Call of Duty, PUBG, Fortnite. It did a really good job with all those games. Not only that, you have SD card support with 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM on the base model. You have stereo speakers that sound great. A headphone jack is still on here. NFC is on here. The fingerprint scanner is actually physical. It's side mounted. And then you also have on here a pretty good camera setup. Now the actual image quality on this older flagship is still pretty good. It's a 12 megapixel standard and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. It does shoot in 4K 60 on the front and back, and it has a 10 megapixel selfie. You'll be surprised just looking at these shots. It actually takes some really great shots, great dynamic range, very punchy color on here. I think the only thing that has aged about this camera is probably low light scenarios. Pretty much you probably will get, or you will get, like a softer kind of shot. But otherwise, if you're in good lighting to medium lighting, this phone still takes some really great pictures in my opinion, and it also takes some pretty good video. Now, the battery life is probably the only downside with this phone. It does have a 3100 milliamp battery, and it lasts roughly around 4 hours, 30 minutes. But it does have wireless and reverse wireless charging, which is pretty cool. But if you are gonna buy this phone, I would spend an extra 50 bucks and get a battery case or something like that, and you'll be really happy with this device. All right, so next is the LG V60. So this is the best one on the list. Now, Verizon has these for 140 on eBay, and then you also have them for on T-Mobile for like 130. So the locked versions are much cheaper than the unlocked version. But if you have the extra money, I say go ahead and get the unlocked version, because it is only like 200 bucks, or it's like it might be a little bit cheaper than that now on Amazon. But if you do have the money, go ahead and get the unlocked version. Just because the unlocked versions are always better in my opinion. So this phone is just really awesome, right? So it's got an aluminum frame. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It's just built like a tank. It's a very, very, very well built phone. You also have a pretty big OLED display. It's at 6.8 inches. It's 1080p 395 for the PPI. Now this phone does lack high refresh rate, and it does lack 1440p. But this phone does have a very nice display when you look at it in person. I mean, it still looks really good. It's a very high quality panel. Not only that, but the trade-off is that this phone actually has a dual screen case capability. So if you can go on eBay, buy the $100 case. It might be a little cheaper now, and you can turn it essentially into two phones. So anybody that is into true multitasking, you'll really, really love the V60. This phone got Android 12, and it hopefully we'll get Android 13. It's still getting updates till this day. So hopefully we'll see that Android 13 update. It has the Snapdragon 865 chipset on here. Very powerful phone. It will play pretty much anything you throw at it at high settings. PUBG, Call of Duty Mobile, Apex. I played them all. Check out the gaming test, and you'll enjoy your experience with gaming, especially with the dual screen case. You'll have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. You also have some really excellent sounding stereo speakers, great bass quality, very loud. And then this phone on top of that has a headphone jack with a quad DAC, so you get very high quality audio with this phone as well too, which is really sweet. The under the display fingerprint sensor works really well. Unfortunately, there's no face unlock, which I wish it had, but the cameras on here are also pretty good as well too. You also have a triple camera setup. It's a 64 megapixel standard, a 13 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 0.3 depth sensor. It shoots in 8K 30, and then you have a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. You get some pretty nice shots out of the V60. Very good natural color signs on here, good detail. I think anybody would be pretty happy with the shots that you can get out of the V60. On top of that, you also have a 5,000 milliamp battery. This phone actually does excellent with battery life, so this phone easily lasts a full day. I would argue a day and a half, and you have wireless charging on top of that as well too. So overall, this is just an awesome phone. And also, a lot of people don't know this phone also has pen support as well too, so that's also another bonus. So absolutely love the V60 here. Next, we got the iPhone SE. Now you can find this on Amazon. It's around $150. This is the 2020 version, one of my favorite versions, because I actually prefer this one over the iPhone SE 2022, which this is just much cheaper, and it's basically can still do everything that SE 2022 does, besides like the newer chip. But the chip on here is still fast. It still caters towards the people that want this type of body style. So you have the older sort of iPhone 8 kind of body style here. IP67 dust and water resistance, got aluminum frame, glass back. It's got that old design. Really, people like it for the home button. So if you're somebody that likes a physical home button, it's really good for that. Also, this phone does have a very, very small 4.7 inch IPS LCD, and it's 720p. It's 326 for the PPI. It's a pretty good display since it's so small. I don't have any issues with it just looking at it. But it gets the job done. Like I said, there's no notch or punch hole or anything, so a lot of people like that. And like I said, it's extremely easy to one-hand this phone. This phone is running the latest iOS 16. It has the Apple A13. You'll be surprised, this phone is fast. It's very fast, and it games really, really well. You can play pretty much anything. PUBG, Call of Duty. There was nothing in the App Store that I could not play with this phone. It does a really great job with that. You do only have 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM, but there is a 128 gig version as well too. You'll be surprised. The cameras on here are pretty good. It's a 12 megapixel standard. It shoots in 4K 60, and then a 7 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p 30. Now it's only one camera, but that one camera still to me takes really good shots, especially in good lighting and stuff like that. It takes some very, very good shots. So I have no issues with the camera on here. Besides that, it's only one lens. Video is also pretty good on this phone as well too. So like I said, I have no issues. The shots that you get for $150 with this phone, I think are pretty impressive. Like I said, Touch ID is on here. A lot of people like that. This is also one of those phones where the battery life is kind of trash. Again, like 4 hours, roughly 4 hours, 30 minutes of screen on time. It's a very small phone, so I would buy a battery case. You also have wireless charging, which is pretty sweet on this device as well too. So for people who like Touch ID, like small phones, you want something that's still pretty powerful, this is definitely a great buy. Now the Samsung Galaxy S10, you can easily find this on Amazon for around 180, 170 bucks. So this is again another very cheap phone, and it's basically very similar to the Galaxy S10e. It's just overall a little bit bigger. So it's got a 6.1 inch display, but it's actually 1440p. It's 550 for the PPI, so much higher resolution panel. Just looks better, and also still somewhat easy to hold. It's sort of like in the middle of people who don't want something too big, but you don't want something too small. This phone, again, the same update treatment, Android 12, One UI 4.1. It will get around 2-3 years of security patches, and then we have Snapdragon 855 on here. Again, same thing with the S10e. Phenomenal when it comes to performance still. Check out my gaming test. It still plays everything at pretty good settings. You also have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM. Stereo speakers are great. This one has the headphone jack. You also have the fingerprint scanner is actually under the display on this one. It works very fast. You can do face unlock as well too. And you also have an extra camera with this one as well. It's got a triple camera setup, 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, 2x optical zoom, and then the 60 megapixel ultra wide. It's using 4K 60 on the front and back with a 10 megapixel selfie. It pretty much takes the same shots as the S10e, but the only difference is you get that 2x optical zoom on here as well. So this phone has a slightly better battery life than the S10e. It's 3400 milliamp. So this one, for me, it gets roughly around like 5 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time, and then you have wireless and reverse wireless charging. I really like this phone. Like I said, the size of it is nice. The display is great. And it has a lot of features people still like headphone jack. Also, you have SD card support. A really, really good processor still, and pretty good cameras. All right, so last is the OnePlus 8. I really like this phone. So this phone does have the 90 hertz panel, which is really sweet. None of the other phones have it on this list. It's got a 6.5-inch display. It's 1080p, 402 for the PPI. And like I said, I really like that this phone has 90 hertz. It's got a glass back, aluminum frame on here. This phone is actually upgradable to Android 13 with Oxygen OS 13, which is pretty sweet. So I'm really happy about that, and I'll probably make a video about that. But that's not the highlight with this phone. The highlight with this phone is that it is the best gaming phone on this list. So it has the Snapdragon 865, but everything, all of your major games like PUBG runs at 90 frames, Call of Duty runs at max frames, Fortnite even runs really good at max frames as well too. This is a phenomenal gaming phone. You get really good settings, so it's very well optimized for gaming. Check out the full gaming test that I did. It's got 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. Stereo speakers are fine on here. There's no headphone jack. NFC is on board. The fingerprint scanner under the display is great. One of the things I like about this phone is Oxygen OS is pretty sweet. I do like, it's sort of a blend between simplicity and customizations that I really like. What this phone, the downside with this phone is actually the cameras are, I would say, the worst on this list. It's got a 48 megapixels standard, a 16 megapixel ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel macro. It's using 4K 60 and then a 16 megapixel selfie. Shoots in 1080p 30. Basically, I would never choose these cameras over any of the other phones on this list. I just don't like the way this phone takes shots, and it's really got a lot to do with the image processing when it comes to color and stuff like that. It's just, you have to do a lot of editing with the shots. So that's one thing that I do not like. So, but on the flip side, this phone does have pretty good battery life. It's got a 4300 milliamp battery. It does have 30-watt charging as well too, so it charges very fast. And like I said, battery can easily get you around close to 6 hours. So yeah, I really like this phone for gaming. The screen with the 90 hertz. And the really fast chip with Oxygen OS. The only downside is I think the cameras actually kind of suck, in my opinion. So be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.